Imagine a conscious contact with God so strong that no matter what you are doing or not doing, that no matter what your kids are up to or not up to, and that whether you've got the person of your dreams or they're just not cooperating, that you are happy, content, and at peace. A space where everyone else's thoughts, attitudes, and actions are beautiful and exactly as they are supposed to be. Well, this is the space where I like to play. My name is Misha Z, and this is today's Bitch Slap. Join me as I shed light on the thoughts, actions, and attitudes that are causing you pain, and we train our minds to go to the capital S inner self, the joy that is waiting for us, the God within.
Meg the Awesome, Meg Gibbs.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast. I want to say when I saw you scheduled it as Meg the Awesome, I was just like, yes, I love you, Meg. It was beautiful. Oh my gosh. And I just want to tell everybody listening right now, we just had I don't know how many minutes that was of silence before we started here. Just to connect to source and ground and feel that love and just let this be what it's supposed to be, and I say that because I love that I can do that with you.
Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to slip into that space together. And I know the feeling of like just connecting for that support. And I know in that silence, what I love is that everybody does something different. Like that's something I learned really early on. And so I'm always curious about what people do in that silence. But part of what I was holding today is just prayers for you, prayers for me, and prayers for connection to spirit and all that is to really just hold us and to trust that whatever wants to come through, whatever wants to come up today. Like there was a question in scheduling about like, what are we here to talk about or whatever? And I was like, I trust it's just going to be what it's going to be. Cause I've recorded a few podcasts and sometimes afterwards, the wheels are spinning and it's like, oh shoot, I didn't say that thing, or I wish I had done this, or I wish whatever. And so I really wanted to approach this differently because we know each other, right? We know each other so well that it's like, I talked to you yesterday, even though it's been like a
couple years, right? A few years, perhaps something.
Yeah. And so just leaning into that, like, we can trust, we can lean in, we can slow down. So the energy even right now feels like calm, slow, not necessarily high energy podcast stuff,
right?
But just like authentic and real and just calming to like just ease into it maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. So good. You look beautiful. I'm going to tell you.
Oh, thank you.
You do. You really do. You look amazing.
Oh, that's very
exciting. You look vibrant. You might not feel it, but you look it.
I'll take it. I'm enjoying playing with hair stuff and seeing your like 80s hairband hair ready to go. I just feel like there's more energy coming out of your hair maybe than even inside of your body.
Right. I like your, I'm not sure what color you have swooping, but it's beautiful. Little red to blondish kind of. Yeah. I was writing down some notes and I think of life as like the arc of life, and I think like most of us have teenage problems when we're teenagers. We have 20-year-old problems when we're in our 20s. We have 30-year-old problems when we're in our 30s, on and on to typically these days, it seems you have the big health issues into your, whatever it is, 60s, 70s, 80s, but there's that arc of problems, right? Yeah. And I think what's striking and poignant about you and your story is some of those life problems got accelerated right into your early years. And so I know your mom passed away when you were pretty young, right?
Yeah.
How old was that?
Yeah. So I was 25. And it's interesting because when I was coming on choosing to do this, part of what I know, I'll just say up front as a release and permission for myself and to hold, is that sometimes I feel this pressure as a practitioner, which I'm sure we'll get into, to be polished and like sparkly, right?
Yes.
And then as a person, we've got all this other stuff that sometimes we hold in the background. And today I was like, I'm meeting with my friend Misha. We're going to talk about life. And I know that we're going to talk about our lives. So one of the things that I've never really talked publicly about, that I talk privately with people I know, is about this grief and healing work and all of that. So it's funny to me that that's like where we're starting, because absolutely. So my mom had breast cancer 3 times, and it started when I was 9. So 9, and then I believe I was 18 or 19. And then the last time when I was 23, and that last 2.5 years of her life, I was her primary caregiver. And so as she had it 3 times, her breast cancer metastasized into bone marrow cancer, and she lost mobility and all of that. And so it was a really challenging thing to go through, like you said, early mid 20s, and immediately you have to grow up, right? And I had never paid rent before because I moved home after college, and it was this funny like synchronicity of, thank God I moved home. I moved home because I was like paralyzed by, oh my God, what do? I can go anywhere in the world and do anything. And it's just like so much that I couldn't make that big choice. So I ended up moving home and lived at home with her. And it's always just been she and I. So we have a single parent, only child relationship. And I have extended family and like a very interesting alternative family that I'm happy to talk about.
Yes, I have note of that.
Yes. But the piece with my mom is that she was all of those cliches of like, she was my best friend. She was literally my spiritual teacher. And we coexisted in each other's lives almost as like, I don't know how to say it, but like we created our lives together, you know? And she was a shamanic spiritual teacher, Reiki master, and therapist. And so she had these like 2 medicine circles of women. So from a very young age, I started helping her like type up workshops because she wasn't great on the computer, or gathering stones for medicine wheels, or doing things that would be considered kind of like typical apprenticeship behavior from an Indigenous perspective, but we're white women. So I want to call that out because people can't see me, right?
Yes.
But when she passed, there's so many places we can go with the story, right? But when she passed, part of what happened was I lost my spiritual community. I lost my mom. I lost my best advice giver, my closest confidant and friend and support. Like, she really created a space for my weirdness in the world, is how I like to talk about it. And so our relationship continues today, I'll be honest. So February was 9 years since she passed, which is insane. And I know you lost parents early too, so I don't know if you want to share about that. But it's that space of I've continued a relationship with her because our souls are intertwined. Like, our souls still have things to say. And sometimes I have to be really clear. And this is something I talk about with grief. Because when somebody says to you, like, oh, she's with you always, I'm like, I'm going to punch you in the face. Like, that's not your decision. That's not your call. That's not actually something I'm comfortable with. Like, I get to decide. So I like to talk about grief with some sassiness, because the truth is, like, nobody knows what you're going through but you. And yes, there are like universal truths that we can talk about, but the experience of loss is so different. Even losing a mom, those two people's experiences are completely different, you know? So, yeah. So what questions do you have? Because I'm spilling over.
Thank you. Well, I'm struck that I guess it would be 9 years that my parents passed away. 2012. So that's 9 years, right? Yeah,
Yep.
that's 9 years. Holy mackerel. So I didn't realize that our sort of arc of that experience was that close
Yeah.
as far as the timeline. Yeah. So I'm very struck by that. I think it's now plainly evident why I was so connected with you when we met through Kyle Cease and all that.
Mhm.
And we could talk about that too. I don't, but yeah, the grief pattern, man, the grief pattern. Like, yeah, I know for me, I finally feel like I'm on the other side of a lot of grief, you
Mhm.
know, and oh, it'll take a year or 2 year, whatever people tell you how it's supposed to go down. Like,
It
it's
doesn't.
like, what's that?
It doesn't,
It
whatever they
doesn't.
tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever they tell you. Yeah. And how I loved how you were saying how personal it is. And yeah. And I think I like how you said, I'm going to take ownership of my experience. I think that's what I heard you say. And I think that that's very powerful for me because for a number of years, as I'm trying to get through it or heal or whatever is going down, I'm like internalizing other people's ideas and thoughts. And it definitely oftentimes did not serve me.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and I think even like, so I joined this group and I'll talk about it because I think it's absolutely awesome. It's called the Dinner Party and it's a national organization and they have different chapters. So they have a chapter here in Denver and it's specifically for people who have gone through loss in their 20s and 30s.
Mm.
And so it's been really interesting. I joined in December right before the pandemic, so in 2019. And then we've continued to meet over Zoom virtually when we can, about once a month. And then part of what happened is the experience of losing somebody at that point in our lives is often kind of how you said, like out of the developmental arc, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like it's early and it was early for my mom to die, like all of that. And what I noticed is that everybody handles grief differently, right? And so there were people in the group who were like a year or 2 years out. And I was like, oh my God, I'm 8 years out and I can barely just start talking about this like this.
Yeah.
And so it was so interesting because there are people who are like reading books and listening to podcasts. And what I realized is like, I couldn't entertain or have space for other people's trauma and loss stories. Like I couldn't handle it for 8 years. So what I want to say to anybody who's listening, who's dealing with grief stuff is like you said, there's no right way to do this. There's not like, you have to address it this way. And I think I had a unique experience in that so I worked for about a year after my mom passed and people had told me, like you said, they were like, this is how you do it, right? They were like, don't change anything major for a year. Don't change your job. Don't change your housing situation if you can. Don't change whatever. Don't move to the Maldives and, blow all your money. And in the moment, you're like, no, I think the Maldives sound really great and I should just go do that thing. But I didn't. I was responsible. I stayed. I hated it. God, I honestly, I think everyone's personality is different, but I stayed through that year and I had a lot of really important and amazing support at work where I was, because I worked in a really empathetic environment and people knew a lot about loss and grief. But the experience of being told what to do is tough. And I think that after that, I quit my job in 2013 and I was like, dove head into grief. And I was like, I just want to get through it. Right. Like, what if I just really grieve and really take this year and really, and that's not, it didn't go like that. I just cry a lot often, like I'm a feeler, I'm a big feeler. And it just means that I focus on it and I cry a lot often. And that's totally different than other people's experiences. There are people who drink about it, talk it to death, don't talk about it ever, completely go in distraction mode. So it's been interesting to hear these people who are so close to it, like a year or two in. And then there's one person in our group who lost her mom when she was like 15. And so it's been 20 plus years for her. She's the oldest, quote unquote, loss in the group.
Yes.
And it's just so interesting because this is not a group specifically about parent loss or cancer. It's you lose however you lose your person. And I love this language around your person, because the difference is that everyone's person is different. And what I mean by that is that just because I lost my mom, she was my specific person, but somebody else losing their mom, that might not be their person. Their person might be their best friend or their cousin or, you know, whoever it is that really rocks your world. Yeah.
I love that. It reminds me of a story. And I'll tell you, I, in my more arrogant youth, my wife at the time, Dawn, I don't know how old you were, if you remember, but when Princess Diana died, I remember that for a lot of women it shook her up. You know, she, for whatever reason, Diana had, Princess Di had a strong connection with a lot of women. And I remember when she passed away and it shook up Dawn, and I was very arrogant and like she's just a English whatever, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps or whatever mentality I had.
Right.
But anyway, I just reflect that back to, we don't know what that death is that's gonna perhaps rock our world, you know, and some people it might not, I guess, right? But for me, it definitely did. I was thinking about for you too, when you were telling about the time frame of your mom passing. I mean, it was almost too like the end of your youth, the end of it was like, it's a symbol for a lot of change and a lot of deaths of not only your mother, but parts of Meg, you know, and how timing can just rock you.
I mean, and what I'll say about the Princess Di thing is like one thing, and I know you know this, anybody who's gone through it knows it, is it's always then from that point forward, whoever your person is, whatever experience that is that really shakes you, is that then it's just always loss on top of loss. Like, and we talk about loss, and it's not only death, right? It can be losing a job, going through divorce, losing a friendship, breakup. Like, it doesn't have to look a certain way, but what happens is all that loss gets compounded. And I noticed that a lot in like romantic partnerships, going through a breakup, hitting me really, really hard, because it's that feeling of like, oh, my heart is being ripped out of my body again. Because that's what it feels like, where other people are like, I like ate ice cream and watched TV for 2 days, and then like, I'm back out there, I don't care, you know? So,
oh my God.
Yeah, it just
That's
like,
so
it depends on what your story is. And it always reminds me of like, whatever that quote is about, we never know what people are going through. Like, everyone's fighting a battle that you can't see. And that like struck me so hard, of especially that year when my mom was sick and after she died, that those kind of 2 compounding years of feeling like nobody knew what I was going through.
Yeah. Is that your pooch?
Yeah, she's my dog's gonna walk in and out and make lovely noises.
Cool.
Flapping her ears.
Yes.
But the experience of like trying to hold it together so hard. And I just remember being in a coffee shop and being like, don't cry at the barista, just get the chai and leave. Don't cry at the barista, get the chai and leave. And like having to repeat to myself how to handle the moment. Because if you ask me one question, how was your day? Oh my God, just like tears, right?
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I think, you know, what triggered it for me was that like it was another breakup like a few years after my parents had passed, right? That like, that's what broke the floodgates open for me. It was, so I like how you said that. We don't know what the circumstance is that's going to unleash or if it, I don't know. It's, for whatever reason, it was an experience that I got to go through, but I definitely have a much more I don't know if respect or with the empathy for people who have gone through these types of things. And it's like, oh yeah, where before, again, I was very much like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
that's just
Right.
not going to cut it. Anything else you want to say about that before?
I think the last, like, I'm honestly, I could talk about this for hours, but
Yeah.
the piece that I remember, kind of like what you're saying, is I dated somebody in college who lost their mom while we were together.
Mm,
And I remember being like, quote, I think she's doing it wrong, quote unquote. Like,
yes.
because at the time that partner was like partying a lot and not crying and expressing her feelings. And I was like, I think she needs to like sit with this and deal with this. And I remember not, because I wasn't going to impose that belief, but I just remember feeling trying to hold her and hold space for her and understand. At the time I was like, why is she so mopey? Why is she laying around? Why is she getting high every day? You know, this kind of
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was really not my way of handling things. And then after a year, I remember we were climbing a tree, just very like Guilford College fashion of hippie children.
Yeah.
And I remember her just saying to me very delicately, I think I'm ready to cry about this now. I think I'm ready to feel this now. And it had been a year after her mom died. And
Mm,
after that, so my mom passed away maybe 4 years after that. And I just remember my sense of empathy being like, I had no idea how to support that person at the time. And
mm,
also like, I have so much brashness and anger if somebody comes at me with, this is how you should grieve. So it's funny to look back and be like, me thinking this is how she should do it. Why isn't she feeling? Why isn't she whatever? And now having so much compassion for people who are grieving and being
yes.
like, girl, you got to do it the best way you know how, because our culture is not taught how to grieve. Our family is not taught how to support you.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how to say the right thing ever. Like, it's a losing battle. And so being with people who can wrestle with that and know, like, no, you're going to say the wrong thing. No, you're going to show up and do the wrong thing and still stay. Like, that's the piece that I think is my biggest takeaway, is like, I value showing up so hardcore
Yeah.
that like I have very little time and energy for people who don't show up. And it's because
Mm,
I saw so many people fall away, because that's part of the grieving process and that's what happens.
yeah. 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 Thank you for that. I had this thought too of which I'm sure you can speak on. I for so much of sort of my arc of grieving, um, was hoping to get back to
Mm.
pre-grief, right? to
Yes.
to be like, I can't wait to get back to the old me. and
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
became extremely clear that that old me, that old space is never coming back,
God.
right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is a big one for me, because the way, I don't even know if this makes sense, but I've done so much writing about grief, right? And one of the things that I wrote early on was that it felt like when she passed that it was like the world was purple before she died, and then afterwards it was green. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's not better or worse. It's just literally two completely different worlds. I'm different, you're different. The experience of being alive is different.
Yeah.
And it divided. So there's a very clear division, like you said, of old self and new self. And that, oh God, that hunger. I mean, it makes me emotional, like that desire to be who we were. And like you said, we'll never get back to,
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
And acknowledging, like, I talk about that, whether that's in therapy or with friends or whatever, like my old self, there are really clear things where, like, I used to travel. I used to travel internationally. I was going abroad. I went abroad with my mom. We had a really beautiful sacred trip to Peru together. Like, I was a Spanish major because I ended up just traveling to these Latin American countries. And I had such a connection to that part of my identity that even from being a child, they joked that like, I went to sleepaway camp when I was 5. And then as I was like 8, I started going to a new state because I wanted to get further and further away. There was just this desire for travel. And since my mom died, I have not once traveled internationally, where I could name 6 different places I went, you know, in the years before that. And that desire and what happened for me, and I don't know, everyone's experience is different, but I would say compound grief, PTSD from the loss of my mom, and then like really intense anxiety that got brought on along with that I think got exacerbated from that time. And so it's just like the idea of travel, spontaneity, a lot out of your control has not been a great mental health space to be in.
Okay. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you for that honesty.
Oh yeah. But that sense of like, oh, who is that part of me? What is that maybe wants to be rekindled? And what is that needs to be let go of?
Yeah. I love that. That's a great way to think about it. Yeah. And be willing to play in that a little bit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think for you, when your mother passed as well, it sort of forced your hand in some certain ways too, perhaps.
Yeah. Say a little more about what you want me to say, because I think I know where you're going, but say more.
Well, I mean, I think your world changing like that, your defined path, or I don't know. I know that what does it mean to you? I'm going to ask you. You tell me what it means to you, and then we'll go from there. Okay.
Can I curse on this podcast?
Absolutely, curse away.
So, I stopped having time for bullshit is the biggest difference. Okay. So when my mom was sick, part of what came up for me was I wanted to have conversations that mattered. That was the driving force in my life, was like, I was so grateful to be home with her and have that experience of being able to connect and talk about things that mattered, and see, you know, as she changed, recognizing these would be the last conversations, and the people who helped caretake with me and who supported me and who supported us as a family, was phenomenal. And the experience of like, I don't have time to not do my life's work. I don't have time to, you know, fits around. Like we've got stuff to do here. We have a limited amount of time. I see what happens to somebody when they're losing their mind and losing their purpose and losing their understanding of mobility and how to be themselves in the world. And that was really painful, like really painful to watch. But sorry, my dog.
So good. I love it.
Allie, go lay down, baby. You know, just real casual. Yeah,
she's saying hi. What's up, Pooch?
Oh my gosh. It's raining outside. And so she's just gone and danced in the rain a lot, and now is going to just, you know, shake all over the living room. Anyway, sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
So part of what happened, and this is kind of the trajectory that brought me to meeting you and all of that group, is that I heard about coaching. Like I heard about life coaching, and something energetically just felt really aligned for me. And I got excited, and I didn't want to research it because I'm an overthinker. So I was like, don't get too into it. Like just feel that intuitive hit, listen to what comes up for you. And so I started looking around about what coaching is and how do you do it, and, you know, that kind of thing. So I started coach training when I was still working at my last job. And
what was the last job before? Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to work for the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Okay.
And I was the bilingual wish coordinator for Georgia and Alabama. So I worked with Spanish speaking families and also English speaking, but it was my job to like create the logistics to make wishes happen. That was our role.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So the challenge is that I was working with like cancer and dying at home and also working with life-threatening illness at work. And people outside of me would say, that sounds awful. How are you doing that? And I was like, I just had to keep my head down and keep going. Right. Cause like, I didn't know what else to do. But in that experience, I was like, so tired of doing paperwork, doing admin, doing things that didn't align with who I was, and really not using my gifts most of the time, like a little bit getting into that creative element and creating that spark and magic. But a lot of our job and our role, honestly, was doing paperwork. And I was like really, really, really deeply unhappy with having an admin position. I wanted to be with people. I wanted to be connecting. And what I noticed is I started having conversations with my coworkers about like, well, what really matters to you? What do you care about? If you weren't here, what would you be doing? Like, what excites you? Blah, blah, blah. You know, questions that later would become like, what lights your spirit on fire? And like, what are you here for? And some of those deeper things. But I would go into this space where I remember like stepping aside into my office, having a 45-minute like spiritual discussion with a coworker. And then we both just like went back to our desk and started doing paperwork. And I was like, this is not okay. And and so when I found coaching, I was like, you mean I get to get paid to have important conversations about people's dreams and fears and shit that matters? I was like, yes. I want that. I totally want that. So that's the like bright, you know, like rainbow and butterfly version. That is not what happened. That is not how it went.
Not how it went, but
no. Well, so this place of like, you know, this desire from my mom's experience to say, all I want to do is have conversations that matter. That's what drove me to start a business. That's what drove me to go through training and leadership development and coach certification and all of that. And I guess I was like 26 at the time. And I knew that as a really young person, I had been through a lot, but not everybody would see that. They would see my face or they would see my age. Yes. And so I was like, well, this is important to me. So I invested thousands of dollars and I like got certified and all of that, because I didn't want to have to jump through any hoops of somebody telling me I wasn't qualified.
Yes.
I'm taking this seriously. It's important to me, because the truth is, and you know this, you can literally make yourself a business card right now and call yourself a life coach, which is like, so detrimental to the business of people who really do take the time to learn what coaching is, because also people think coaching is advice giving, and it's not. Coaching is actually about asking questions and drawing somebody else's answers out of themselves, like out of their truth, out of their knowing. It's not my job to tell somebody what to do, which is what people often think it is.
Yeah,
right?
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And so what happened for me is I started a business in the midst of grief. And that's the part I want to link back. Because nobody told me, you know, as a 26-year-old who didn't know anything about how to run a business, that this would be hard. I didn't understand. I was like, I love talking to people. This will be great. You know, I just didn't know. And as you know, it's been a ride. It's been a very long, complicated ride. Yes. And I know I'm like talking a lot, but I'm
good. Dude, I love it. This is what I was wanting to hear. So you're right on. I'm very excited.
But so this piece about starting a business, I want to come back to, because I started my business in 2013, and I watch people around me, even to this day, being deep in this like entrepreneur journey, where people will start a business and within 2 years it's working. And I'm so envious. Like, I'm 8 years deep and I'm still trying to figure it out. But I know, especially, you know, like old soul behavior, like we're in this for the long haul. Yeah. Like we're in this to like learn and grow, change, evolve, yada, 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 all of that.
Yes.
But it's like, I signed up for this 10, 20-year track. I didn't sign up for a like year in, year out experience.
Love that.
Okay. I'm going to pause and just like check in.
Okay.
Like what are your thoughts or questions that you have from here?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for that vulnerability. And it's beautiful. There's two things I want to touch on. And I'm not sure which to do first. So maybe I'll let you decide. One is the Native American aspect of the shamanism,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's what it is. It's Native American shamanism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Absolutely. And how powerful. I think I feel like, I don't want to say glossed over it, but touched it lightly. And I think I want people to know like how deep and how like I'm getting the chills. Think about it. Literally all my hair just stood up even more. How that is a massive, deep, rich, profound part of your life, right? Yeah. So I think we should talk about that more. And it's at some point, or perhaps not. I'll let you. We'll see where it goes. And then the other thing is, you helped me so much at that time when you and I and Greg and Jess were really working a lot together, or just, I don't even know if working is the right word. We were just like going through it, whatever we were going through. And just, you brought in beautiful movement. Like you would bring in these movement exercises and they would, I would say rock my world. They would, I was like, oh my God, I just remember these profound, you were shaking stuff loose in me that was amazing. And then these beautiful visualizations that you would have us do. And I don't know about Jess's and Greg's experience with it for me, but I just remember just like tapping into some really cool stuff. Yeah. And then that door's open. Go.
Yeah, that door's open. Great. Yeah. So let's start with the first one, because I think that history is important for me and for people listening to understand where I'm talking from, like where my heart is and what's coming through that. Yeah. It's interesting because so I have a really alternative family. I have lesbian moms. I have a huge gay family. I have a lot of adopted family. And so I was raised in Atlanta. And I say that because like we lived in the city. I went to school. I was, trying to have a normal experience and failing very often. And so when I was 11, my mom started working with a Lakota teacher.
Okay.
So I started working with that teacher too. So from childhood, I started experiencing like little by little being kind of initiated and welcomed into this spiritual lineage. And our teacher lived in Nashville, so we would drive up there. And I remember in the beginning, like my mom would have an hour session with this teacher, and I would have like she would bring me in for 15 minutes, right? Like starting small, and then 30 minutes. And then eventually I started having my own sessions with them. But I was always too young to join the groups. So part of what happened is my moms were both in a medicine circle group. And there were women's medicine circle groups led by this teacher and men's groups that were separate. And then there were times where everybody came together. So growing up, I started doing this work, and my mom started doing this work just on her own spiritual healing journey, both because she basically, when she found out about the first cancer diagnosis, started really becoming a seeker, and I think had always been, and started raising me, I would say, more pagan and like goddess worshiping or women's spiritual practices. And the one aside I'll put in is that my godfather founded the first existential congregation of Atlanta called the First E. And so as a child, I was saying that when I was like 6 years old, 6 years old saying like, yeah, my godfather founded the first existential congregation. And so we went to the first E growing up. And the idea was that you could believe anything you wanted to. So I grew up with this space of like, I thought church and congregation was we sing This Little Light of Mine, and then we go to the park. I thought that's what it was. Come to find out that's not what everybody's experience was.
Yes.
Of course.
Right.
But so as my mom started getting deeper into the spiritual practice, I started being kind of brought in more and more. And we would do like medicine wheels on the earth. And it became a part of seeking inner guidance. So basically like the way I decided which college to go to is I did a medicine wheel in the backyard and I sat in each direction and I asked for guidance and support from spirit and from, you know, the beings who loved me and the universe and all of that. And so growing up, I had this experience of being extremely loved and cultivated for having intuition and spiritual gifts and vision and understanding. And then out in the world, I was absolutely misunderstood and chastised and people were mean to me and all of that. So it kind of like, it split my experience of safety, which has had a huge impact on the work I do and why I do the work I do. Because all I want is for people to feel safe in who they are. And sometimes that's about their identity and sometimes that's about who they're becoming, right? And so that piece for me, you know, like it's mentioned on my website, but it's like, this is how I see the world. This is not like, oh, I took a shamanic workshop one weekend and now I'm a shaman. Like, I don't even call myself a shaman. Yes. That's not a word I use for myself. Other people do call me that sometimes, but I'm a shamanic practitioner. I walk this spiritual path. And so it's very ingrained in how I see the world. And the medicine wheel, I'll mention really briefly, is split into the 4 directions. So north, south, east, and west, and they each represent something different. So there's a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual or energetic aspect. And all together, that integration is what we're going for, that harmony, that goal of connection, right? And so I think one of the biggest things for me was I have this memory where we went up to my other mom's property in North Georgia, and it's in the mountains and backs into national forest on 3 sides. So it's really wilderness. And we would go and go up for the weekend, and we all went out and did a wheel. And the idea was come back, we'll have dinner together. We cooked dinner and we're sitting around talking. And I was young, I don't know, let's say 12 or 13. And I shared about my experience. And I said, oh yeah. And this is what I saw in the South, or this is what I experienced in the West and the East and the North. And my mom was like, you got more in an afternoon than some people get in a year. And I just remember being like, I don't understand. Like, cause as a child, I and most of us were unblocked. Right?
Yeah.
Like we're just in it. We're connecting. We don't know any better. You told me to go out there and talk to spirit. That's what I did. Right?
That's right. That's what we did. It's amazing.
Yeah. And so I think that journey of it being hyper personal is important to me, because I've been doing this professionally for 8 years where I support people on their spiritual path, but I've been on my journey for over 20, you know? And so that piece, so the other piece that I like to mention is that's my first teacher. I know you have a question. Hold on 1 second. And then
no, I was going to say a comment. Hold that thought. I was just going to say, it's not a whim. This isn't, not that there's anything wrong with a whim, right? Like that. So go on.
No, absolutely. And then, so as my mom was going through her healing process, she really attacked it from both the physical and the energetic. That's how she saw cancer in her body, was that it needed to be dealt with medically, but it also needed to be dealt with spiritually. So she was working these 2 elements. And then when I was like 17, we started working with a second teacher, and my other teacher is Don Mariano, and he lives in Peru. He lives in the Andes of Peru. So he's a mountain shaman versus a jungle shaman.
Okay.
And I say that because he came to the US to do work to connect the Andes Mountains and the mountains in the US. So the Appalachians and the Rockies with the Andes. So he's like connecting the energy and rooting them together. Okay. So these two lineages are what I hold inside of me, both in my body and with like certain medicine stones and crystals and feathers and stuff like that that have been blessed or passed on to me. And I think my journey of being a healer has been a little hesitant, right? Because it took me what I see as a really long time to get here, and others see as like, oh, you're light years ahead of people, or you did that so young. But I think it's like the context of like, I've been searching for my purpose since I was 8 years old, right? Like you got to look at what's going on in the big picture.
I love it. Hold on. I just literally recorded a podcast episode and I haven't put it up yet, but it's like, I wonder if I'm going to be wondering what I'm going to do with my life until the day I die, right? Absolutely. I'll be on my deathbed. Like, what am I going to do with my life?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I still feel that way. Yeah. And so I think this piece for me is that the way I try and describe it, and you see me kind of like touching my heart, is that this is integrated into how I see the world and how I show up in the world, versus I learned a methodology and now I'm going to teach it to you. Like, it's been a long journey. And like, there was a moment where my mom had these, so she was my spiritual teacher. Like I said, I went to workshops, I helped her prepare for them. We, did that and I supported her, but I was a student on that path and in that experience. And there was a moment where she was taking these 2 medicine circles of women, and then she started a third group, and the third group was the healers group. And the healers group, I joke, was like the AP class. So it's like the advanced placement. It like involved more homework. It involved more investment. You had to show up more often, all of that. And you had to stand up in this ceremony and speak your truth that this was your intention. And I almost didn't stand up. And I was so scared. Because
how old are you again at this time?
I was probably 17.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so because she created the group, I was allowed in it, but all the other women are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, I know we've talked about this. I know this is my path, but like, what if it's not my path? And I think part of it is I've always had so much resistance to being so weird. Like, I'm so weird, and it's so hard to just like I came out of the womb with no chance at being normal, and I was so mad about it as a kid, like I just wanted to be a cheerleader, and that was not was not my path. As you see,
that was amazing. Oh my God. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, Louise. So what was your truth? Was that it? I've got your truth.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I
17. Did. You're standing up in front of these, the wisest people you can imagine. Right. I mean, that's what's going on. Right.
Yeah. And I think like, it's scary because there is absolutely no linear path, and there is no handbook, and there is no business course you can take for this, like I joke about like people who were like, I want to be an accountant. I went to school to be an accountant. Now I'm an accountant. I'm like, what is happening? Like a healer's path is literally like not even drawn in circles. It's just like all over the map. There is no straight line, and then you just go for it. And you're like, and not even, of course, when I was that young, I wasn't interested in doing it professionally. That wasn't the point. I definitely resisted doing it professionally. And like when I started coaching, I was like, I'm not going to say I'm a spiritual coach because that's weird and that's woo woo and not legitimate or whatever. And then it was like so clear that I was like, I'm just here to do spiritual work with people. I don't care about this other stuff.
Yeah.
So I just like, I have these kind of seminal moments. And I remember in college, kind of working, quote unquote, with somebody accidentally where like, she started talking to me. And so we were just sitting in like an alcove of the dorm. And I just remember putting my hands on her and doing like some Reiki and energy work. And like, she said to me, like, you're an amazing healer. And I was like, like, we're not going to talk about this. I'm not going to say that. And I think it's funny because like one of my best friends from college and I were talking the other day, and she was like, yeah, when I met you, like you were just so weird and wonderful. And I was like, I was trying to be normal. Like I was trying so hard and it just never happened. That's like the name of my book. But just that feeling of like, I did not walk into this with my arms wide open.
Yeah.
I have like drug the boulder, on a rope every step of the way to be like, can we do anything else? Don't you want me to do something else? And my guides are like, no, we'd like you to do even weirder stuff, So that's what my answer is to you, Misha.
That's amazing. Thank you. Dance. I know there's dance in there, the movement thing. Tell me about that.
So it's funny because like, I have to write these bios and stuff when I apply to speak or do whatever. And so looking back, the synchronicity is that the same year that I started working with the shamanic teacher is the year I started dance. So I was 11. So whatever reason, that was my like transformational year. I started dancing when I was 11. And I have a lot that I could say about dance, but I started working with a pre-professional youth modern company when I was 11 and 12. And so we grew up really fast. I started dancing in New York from 12 to 17, thought I was going to go to conservatory and be a professional dancer. A lot changed in that time. And I just was clear that dance was not my only pathway. And it wasn't as fulfilling as I wanted it to be, because I was like, this might sound arrogant, but I was like, I'm smart. Like I want to use my brain and not just my body. And there's creativity and there's other things happening. So I'm a modern dancer, a contemporary dancer, and have, taken dance class for over 20 years at this point as well. But like went to a performing arts high school. I was in this company, and, the whole goal was to go to New York and dance. And in that experience, one thing I'll say that I've learned to name now that I wouldn't have had the words for at the time, that a lot of people experience, is dance trauma. And I say that because I think at first it started as this joy of movement, right? And then I hit puberty and I was told to my face in front of all these people in dance class over and over again that like I was fat and crappy, because my body had expanded and changed. And I came in as this like skinny, tall, young girl. And then I started developing hips and breasts and, they called me voluptuous. It was just like something happened. And the way that I took it, instead of developing like an eating disorder, I was like, well, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not changing my body for the thing I love. I want to keep moving and I want to keep doing this. But there was a lot of fear in my body. And I say that because you'll start to hear, these different elements that came into the work I do today, which is the like movement healing work, the energy component, the spiritual experience, and then like grounded in like coaching and leadership. Because what happened was like, I love movement, but I was scared and talked down to, and people, like it was a hard experience.
Yeah.
And we lied on our resumes about our weight when I was 14.
So,
It's so
what?
Yeah. And I think that like dance is a constant. You're looking in a mirror, you're looking at the teacher, you're looking at the people you're moving with, and the experience of always comparing yourself to others, always being less than, always trying to improve and perfect and change. And so it's just like even in this moment, I'm like, whoo, take a breath. Like, we gotta sit back and just like for a second, because the experience of like being told you're wrong all the time or being lifted up when you're perfect is not a realistic standard of how to be a person. You know?
You know how wise that is? But at the same time, it's just, I love the simplicity and just the truth in that. And it's like, yeah, thank you for the reminder again. So good. Oh my God. How hard we can be on ourselves and others just is, I'll speak for me, is frightening.
Yeah. Yeah. And it leaks into other things. I think that's the part that's tough, is that like that perfectionism in a dance class leaked into everything else in my life, you know? And which is, so I'll say kind of the departure, or the place that was a turning point for me, is in high school. I started choreographing. So what happened was I got to be in charge of the narrative, and I got to be in charge of holding space. And in college, I choreographed every semester, and it was a really big part of who I am. Talk about like the old parts of who we are, right?
Yeah.
I haven't done that in years. But I realized I needed to create what didn't exist for me and how I wish I had been treated. And what was interesting is in college specifically, so Guilford is a small, historically Quaker liberal arts school, and we had a dance minor. We didn't have a dance major. And so anybody who was dancing often had like some real challenges in their background around dance, where either they had an eating disorder, or they had some mobility stuff, or they were told they weren't good enough, or whatever. It was like, I would say, damaged dancers, quote unquote. And
hold that thought. When you say mobility issues, is that like they are not athletic enough? They can't jump high enough. They're not flexible enough.
Or they had an injury. Like I had several dancers in pieces who maybe sprained an ankle and were not able to perform at the same level anymore. So their career trajectory changed. So what was interesting is like in college, when I continued this like choreography and developing my voice and playing in that space, is I stopped caring as much about the product and the piece that we put on stage, and cared a lot about the process and how it felt to be in the room with people. And what I would say now is like creating a sacred experience of being in your body. And that, as you know, has translated directly into what I do today and why I do it. And just the feeling of knowing it's okay to be in your body, because even as a dance person who loves and needs movement, it has felt dangerous to be in my body. And I think of like even our work together and how powerful it is to just be invited to take a breath and check in and feel what you're feeling inside of your own skin. Is like a radical act. People aren't doing that on a daily basis.
Yeah. Love that.
I'm just noticing how like quiet your energy is right now.
That was beautiful, Meg. I can't even tell you I don't know what the people who hear this will feel or were feeling, but like the God rushes is all I can say. Just the beauty in that, and how it, the pinnacle to, so yeah, now I can help people with this. There's that bit of it. And then I was just really like appreciating the dancer's trauma, or however you termed it at the beginning. I'm like, God dang, that's like to have. And what a blessing that you were able to work within that space. How could I say this? I don't know if make it through's the right the right word, but like find the peace within that, and then just still be able to find a new space to thrive within it, I guess is how I'll say it. So I would, and so much more. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of what that brings up for me is like, I think of what I would say those turning point moments. And because, imagine, or maybe not even imagine, it might be a part of your story, I don't know, but like at 17, 18, quote, my life was over because I wasn't becoming a professional dancer that I had strived, is that the word? Strived to be since I was 12.
Yeah.
So imagine this dream dying because my body type wasn't right, basically.
Right. Which is completely out of your control, right? Like,
oh yeah,
it's happening. And
yeah.
And you're getting perhaps feedback like, you're not developing right. You need to hit puberty differently. And you're like,
exactly. Well, guess what? That's not happening. Yeah. And so what I think happened, so one day I was writing, this is a couple years ago, and that phrase in like 12-step stuff around you're trying to fill that God-shaped hole kind of.
Yes. Trying to fill the God-sized hole with, yes. Love it. One of my favorites. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. What I wrote about one day was that, and this has helped me a lot, is like, there's a Meg-shaped hole in the universe and I'm the only one that can fill it. And there's a Misha-shaped hole in the universe. Yes. There's a U-shaped hole in the universe, and you are the only one who can fill it.
Yeah.
And so what I look at, because I've had more space from the dance piece, is like that failure or that decision or deciding not to go to New York and dance professionally, whatever, that story is, that failure created the spaces that I hold for people because it wasn't held for me.
Yeah.
Right. We kind of like compost and sit with and not rush through that process. I think that's one thing that happens today is like, commodify your hobbies and your gifts and whatever. And it's like, how about we slow down, feel our way through what needs to happen. And I'll say, because I did this internship, I want to say sophomore year of college, with this group called the Liz Lerman Dance Exchange. And they are this incredible dance company, and they were doing community focused dance. And she has, Liz Lerman has won a MacArthur Genius grant because she wrote a textbook about like the Genome Project, but through a dance lens. And like, she's amazing. She started creating some of the happenings in the 70s, is my understanding, in DC, and did activist work. So it was this combo of social justice and dance. And I was like, what is this? How can I do this? So I did a summer internship, and we worked with like people with what they called other abilities. So disabled bodied dancers. So there were people in wheelchairs, people who were polio survivors, people with CP, different forms of physical differences. And they were casting for cerebral palsy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. They were casting for Romeo and Juliet. And it was this amazing combo of humans and movers. And I was a part of a separate piece and was working with a woman who was a polio survivor from years ago and much older than me. And we were doing some contact improv, which is like touch-based dance, sharing weight and supporting each other in different ways. And you're making it up as you go along. So you're playing with this other person. And I just remember the feeling of like, oh, that version of dance of like, I need to go to New York, be in this company, do this thing in this exact way is total bullshit. Like, I was like, oh, there's 17,000 other ways to do this. Okay. And so the experience of just being in my body is probably the most powerful learning I've had in all these years, you know?
Yeah. and you helped me with that. I mean, obviously I referenced it earlier, those profound moments of that. And for me, like, I think, you, me, Greg, Jess, such a disparate group that landed together.
Yeah.
And I say this with love, and it's just the truth of the matter. Like, if we needed to label and grade, profound moments, like Jess and Greg, amazing. And but I just like, I was always, not always, I mean, it just sounds, I don't know how it sounds, but I just was always like, oh my God, Meg is just, it was so many amazing, powerful, beautiful moments, and I think, we're different ages, male, female, all this stuff. Like, I was definitely still on the tail end of my professional life. So yeah, how beautiful, unexpectedly, um, yeah, so poignant. I don't know what my point is. I'm just reflecting. I think that's why I was so excited to see you. I'm just like, oh my God, yeah, just, I over the years, let's say the last 6-7 years, just really started writing a lot, and at some point, I've got stacks of these yellow pads, and I'm like, I
Right.
really just got to let those go and throw them away, right? And just move on from these things. And so a lot of the little pieces of paper and the little nuggets that I save, I'm like, those are Meg things,
Oh, yeah.
So isn't that, and so it's really sweet. And I remember, one of the best things you did for me, and or did for me, or I think we were sort of, it was like our exit conversation after we diligently met for what, once a month or every 2 weeks or something like that.
Every 2 weeks for like 3 years. Like it was a
three
very
years
long time.
A long time, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like our exit interview, if we wanted to call it that, where we were like, this is how I saw you change, or this, I think one of the questions was, this is what I want for you, or this is what I see for you, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember yours for me was like, and it just is like, find that, the joy of youth, and I don't mean like teenage youth. I mean like that kid, find the funness. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for that, because it's been huge in my life.
Yeah. And I remember, oh Lord.
Oh Lord.
I remember like so much of when we've worked together is like honoring the little boy inside of you. Like I often do inner child work with people, and it's something that really honoring that that's okay for you. Like I remember that feeling of wanting that desire to have that piece of freedom again, and that piece of like relaxing into your own joy and not having it be such a big thing, right? Because I think sometimes in the like coaching and leadership realm, we get into like, and then I will write a book and do a workshop and make a thing. And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, that breath I took, or the sunshine I played in, or, whatever the moment is. And what I love is that, you trusted me to do that, right? Like that's the thing, is like, I know I do weird stuff and I ask people to do weird stuff, but the experience of really just taking that breath and being in your body, I feel like is one of our ultimate biggest teachers, because we just don't do it. That's not where we are as a society. We spend all that time in our mind instead of just being with like the essence of you, which I think is the gift, right?
Yeah. Well said. Thank you. Anything you want to comment about I imagine
awesome
when,
you are.
yeah, how awesome I am. Thank you. I'll take it. Go.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I listened to the Greg and Jess episodes, and it's so fun because I was like, it's just like connecting with our friends again, and the feeling of like we have seen each other through so much and seen each other deeply, right? And to trust somebody in that space, especially as strangers, especially like we were four extremely different people with really differing perspectives, which was helpful and awesome to play with. And I just remember like your spirit, the way I would describe it is like you're game. Like you're like, I'm game. Let's go do the thing. Let's go on the adventure. Let's do the meditation. Let's play with the whatever. Like you just have this exuberance that I love. And I feel like these podcasts are a chance not just for connection, but like you're expressing a lot of gratitude. You have a lot of generosity. And I've always seen that in you. So,
oh, thank you for that, Meg.
Of course.
That's beautiful. I'm going to take that in.
Yeah.
Sometimes we got to take that in. Yes.
Absolutely.
How about that first day where we dropped into that house?
I cried in the first like 5 minutes of meeting the group. Yeah.
You're like, you did this to me, teacher. Oh, teacher, son of a bitch.
Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I don't even know what else to say about that. That was just good fun. Okay. Let's see. Atlanta. I have Atlanta arrow, Colorado arrow, house arrow, perhaps girlfriend. I don't know. Wife arrow, perhaps. Like any. There's a lot of like we got to be together as you made this massive choice to go to Colorado, which was just like. I can't even remember why. You're like Colorado. I don't know if you threw a dart or something, or maybe it was the the medicine wheel or what. But go ahead. I mean, you can tell me about any arrow. Address any arrow you want. I just know Atlanta to.
Sure. Yeah. So it's part of the grieving story that after my mom died, I stayed, where I was supposed to stay for a year. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm done. I'm ready to get the hell out. But I knew I didn't want to just like pick up and leave for no reason. So part of it was I went to California 3 different times, drove up the coast, was in Northern California, Southern California, went to the Kyle Cease workshop for Flow Group. And every time it just like didn't feel good in my body to stay. And I was like, well, it doesn't make sense for me to move somewhere more expensive if I don't love it. If there was like a reason or a project or person or whatever.
I remember, let me interrupt real quick. I remember you had sort of this expectation, or it's like, it's got to be California, right? You're like, or like, I wanted to be California.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And it wasn't. And I was like, well, shoot. So I just went back home and I just like waited. And I kept waiting because I worked for myself from home so I could live anywhere, which is a really big pressure because most of us move for jobs or partners or whatever. And just to be like, I want to move somewhere is a very strange experience. So I just kept waiting. And then people kept mentioning Colorado and I was like, no, it's cold and there's snow and I'm from Atlanta. So if there are 3 snowflakes, we shut the city down. I don't understand go live in the snow. That doesn't make sense. But I just had heard it so many times that I couldn't ignore it. And then I was actually at a workshop and there was an older lesbian woman who she was like, I lived in Atlanta, I lived in California, and I lived in Colorado. And if California doesn't feel like the place, then go a little bit more east. They're a little bit more grounded, is what she said, because of the mountains. And I was like, oh, I can hear that because there's a sense of like woo-woo experience that in Colorado feels a little bit different than the woo-woo in California, for instance. Yeah. And so I was like, all right, fine. I've heard it enough. Let me just check it out. And I came here for a workshop and I stayed for like a week and kind of drove to a few different cities. And I got off the airplane and I just immediately, it felt good in my body. And I was like, all right, I haven't even seen the place. I'm going to trust that. It's okay. And so I just was like, all right, I guess I'm moving to Colorado. And then within, a few matter of months, I packed up my life and sold my car, and I bought an all-wheel drive car, and I tried to prepare as best I could. And then I moved out here not knowing people. And it's been like a very challenging transition of moving as an adult without any community, for sure.
Yeah.
But it also, like, that sense of relief of having a place is, a really phenomenal feeling.
Yeah. It's nice to feel that home, or whatever, however you want to say that. Like, yeah, I've landed where I'm supposed to be for now.
Yeah.
Groundedness perhaps is a way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. So then in this last year, I was able to buy a house, and it's my first house, and it's a huge deal. And I've moved so I lived in the house I grew up in from when I was 3.5 until 25, except I was gone for college and for 4 years. And so I'm really used to, like, this is mine. This is where I live. This is my family. This is my community. And so since my mom passed, moving has been horrible. And the year before last, I moved 3 times in 3 months, and it's just been so hard to, like, have that sense of home and grounding. And so when this opportunity came up, it just kind of, like, moved really quickly, and I trusted it. And I did a reading with a Peruvian shaman who was talking to me about, like, being in Colorado would bring me a lot of peace versus moving back to Atlanta, because my family was having some health stuff in the pandemic I was nervous about, and not sure if that was, like, the split, if that was the time I needed to move home. So I decided to stay. And it's literally deciding to stay is, like, opening up that community and opening up that feeling of relief and next steps and whatever. So I'm just trusting that I'm where I'm supposed to be,
Love that. Yeah. I like that. The deciding, that committing, this is it. And then it can feel like in those moments that's a restriction, when in reality, it just, like, it just opens everything up. Right.
Yeah.
So Kyle Cease, I think I forgot to address that. Yeah. So Kyle Cease, anybody who isn't aware of Kyle Cease, you should definitely Google him. Amazing, just to me, an amazing man, and really helped me a lot, and then brought us together. And how did you end up at Flow Group? Because I think any of us that end up at Flow Group, it's a financial commitment, right? And then there's usually something where you're like,
Yeah. So after coach training and certification, I went through leadership development, all with the same company called the Coaches Training Institute, CTI. And in that, I shared, like, a part of myself in one of the leadership workshops that people were talking about as far as, like, comedy. And I love comedy. Comedy is how I've gotten through grief. I've become a comedy nerd. I listen to comedy podcasts. I read about it. I follow certain people, all of that journey. And I just, like, that's what helps me get through all of the, sadness.
Okay.
And in that process, I'm not exactly sure how, but I came across Kyle Cease, and he calls himself a transformational comedian. And I was like, I think I might be in that same vein. I don't know, but let me see what that is. So I just was like, I don't know, I'll go to California, because it was, like, a super cheap workshop that was.
So it was an EOL or something. Was it one of the EOLs? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Evolving Out Loud. Okay.
Yeah, Evolving Out Loud.
$99 or whatever he was doing that for, which was ridiculous, right?
And so I was like, I'll just go see what that is. And that felt like the next step after leadership. And I thought I would move out there, or I thought I would work with him, or I thought, whatever. And I just, like, kind of followed those breadcrumbs. And so went to that workshop. He mentioned Flow Group, and I was like, I definitely need something more. And I'm curious what that is or what that looks like. And at the time I had money to play with in that space.
Yeah.
I wanted to invest in my personal growth. And so I thought that that would like change, my trajectory, which in some ways it did, but it's not like, I think with anything personal growth wise, there's never one thing that's the answer that like, oh, now I've become a chef because I clearly whatever, like it's lots of little things and moments and opportunities.
So how about this? Perhaps anticlimactic for you.
Yes. Yes. And I think also it was, like you said, tied into maybe moving to California. So I was disappointed that I didn't feel that sense of like, oh, I found it, my people, my place, my whatever.
Yes.
I was like, crap, this isn't it. And I spent thousands of dollars.
Yes. I got to keep, oh, damn it. I got to keep looking. And
I got to keep looking. Yeah. I got to keep looking inside of myself, which is always where the answers are, stuff like that.
Yes.
But we need help along the way. So yeah. And so after Flow Group, we did this weekend together, and then we were going to meet every 2 weeks for the program for maybe like something small, like 6 weeks or something like that. There was a few more calls. And then we just kept going.
Yeah.
And our group really just kind of held that cohesive energy and support through lots of different stuff.
Oh my gosh. All of us, right? Lots of different stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So good. I think that and you want to talk about current relationships that you're in or exited or anything like that?
I do not have a current relationship that I'm
in.
What? No.
You are single and ready to mingle?
Single and ready to flamingle. Like a flamingo. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, it's been interesting, and the experience of being single in the pandemic and also being like a physical touch, quality time person has been really hard. I spend a lot of time with my dog, as you know. But yeah, so I like dated a little bit during the pandemic, very little, but it was too vulnerable because the risk is so high to say, you're not supposed to be within 6 feet of a stranger, let alone put your mouth on them, So I was like, this is not like, just energetically and emotionally didn't feel like the right time. So I would venture out and dip my toe in and then kind of pull back. So it's not, so no wife right now. And I'm open to whoever wants to waltz into my life and be the right person long term. But in this moment, if it's not the Amazon delivery person, I'm not quite sure how that's going to happen.
So have you been enjoying, or have you consciously been like, this is an opportunity for Meg to fill the God-sized hole with God or source or whatever, or for Meg to put Megs, however you said that, Megs filling the universe, the Meg hole with Meg or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think because I've been on my own, have done like a lot of different forms of personal growth work, whether that was, I started doing EMDR, trauma work with a therapist virtually to work on some of the trauma around loss from my mom. I've changed a lot of different things and like taken new classes or experiences. Like I'm in a 9-month training with Resma Minicum, who wrote My Grandmother's Hands, which is about a somatic approach to racial healing, an embodied and energetic approach to racial healing. And it's very sacred work, and it's beautiful, beautiful, hard, tough work, especially as white people to do. But I would highly recommend his work. And
love it.
Just the experience of like, okay, so if now is the time, what do I want to do with that? Now is the time in history. Now is the time personally. Once I moved into this space, I started doing some of the magic of tidying up. So I've gone through my entire house, and I think the last personal growth pitch I'll put out there is I've struggled a lot with sleep stuff, and sleep and anxiety, insomnia, and very related to grief, and have done all kinds of different versions of like taking melatonin and, you know, trying different things. But there's this book that I read that's really incredible called The Power of When. And he talks about different sleep chronotypes. So I am a specific one, and with that one need to be awake for longer during the day than some other people. And so it's been interesting because I'm on my own. I'm like, all right, it's like, I got to get my house in order. I got to get my shit in order. So I'm really working on these different versions of filling my time and filling myself up, and, you know, supporting other people in their experience of like, I think in this process, we've really needed connection and support and realness in a way that there's just been like a very deep longing, both in me and with other people, to have that deep soul connection. So I think I'm doing that both within myself and then with other people when it feels right.
Love that. Thank you. I think that this is a beautiful spot to end. However, is there anything that we did not cover? Or if you're like, oh, I was really hoping I'd get to talk about, or he'd ask me about, or anything feel
I think just a big takeaway for me, both from grief stuff and dance stuff, and, you know, a big part of my personal story is just like, there's no wrong way to do it. Like there's no wrong way to be you in the world, you know, and just to really own that and acknowledge that it's a journey. Because I think sometimes, especially as seekers, that we're often seeking to find something, to find happiness, to find safety, to find security, to find the next right thing. And sometimes it can help, like how we started, which was just taking a deep breath together. So I think maybe if we just take a deep breath together, and I'd like to like lead a small moment of meditation before we go, if that feels okay.
Yes, indeed. Before we do that, or we can do this after, I'm just remembering flashing on all the cool things we did, because I did things with you outside of our extended flow group. And so I would encourage anybody to how can you're always up to something cool, putting something super cool together. Like, so where can the listeners find beautiful Meg?
Yeah. Meggibbs.com. So MEGGIBBS.com. And there are various ways to work with me on there. I work completely remotely, one-on-one with people, sometimes lead groups, that kind of thing. And I do soul aligned branding work with entrepreneurs. I do scientific fingerprint analysis, which we didn't get to, but that's connected to like your life path and what you're here for and kind of what you came into this world to learn about.
Yes.
And then a blend of shamanic healing and coaching work. And it very much like this conversation comes in the moment, intuitively what needs to come up for people. So that's the best way to connect with me, through my website. Yeah. And there's like free guided meditations on there that I've done with Insight Timer too. So if you like my voice, you can listen to more of it.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Yes, we're going to have an episode 2 at some point. The fingerprinting, all that stuff. I forgot about that. Okay.
It's all right.
Thank you for sharing where people can find you and being open. All right. Let's have a moment. Let's have a meditation. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have anything planned, so I'm just going to listen and see what wants to come up. I've got my candle here. So listeners, just imagine that there's a candle in front of you, and I invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath. And check in with how it feels to be you in this moment. Notice if you want to move or wiggle or be still. Very gently extending from your heart, just a small light to connect with that candle. Imagine the candle reaching up, connecting with the sun, and the sun's light coming back towards you. We are all part of this together. You are welcome here, exactly as you are in this moment. May you take this light and fill up your body. Fill up with the love of the universe or whatever you believe in. And allow it to overflow through the top of your head, out your fingers and your toes. Just brimming with light, love, respect, support, whatever you need. Take one more deep breath. And know that this access point is available to you always. When you feel ready, open your eyes, maybe touch your fingertips together, wiggle in your chair, and come back into this space, in this time, in this room, with this breath.
Mm. Mm.
All right, dear, we did it.
We did it. Life is good, Meg Gibbs.
Thank you for spending time with me today. As someone who is committed to growth and service to this world, I so appreciate your willingness to come with me, go within, and serve our world through change. If you found value in this podcast and you know someone who can use this message, share this episode with them. Share it so our mission can be achieved one episode at a time. And of course, subscribe so you can hear more. And lastly, for more resources on what has helped me on my journey and can help you on yours, go to belove.media/resources. That's BELOVE.media/resources. Thank you again for listening.